celebrating success, learning from legends, and growing poppies. This is Tall Poppy Talk with Grace Lewis. Kia ora and welcome to Tall Poppy Talk. Today we have Lachie Good. Now he is a professional freestyle snowboard coach and he's a content creator and he's traveling the world coaching athletes on these multi-month training camps and at competitions. Known for his association with the Outsiders snowboard team, you can, after this, go find some brilliant vlogs on his YouTube channel or head to the Instagram, and it details the behind the scenes action, athlete profiles, and some stunning scenery from their adventures. He is an experienced freestyle coach who has worked with athletes competing at the highest profile events, such as the LAAX Open, World Cups, and of course the Winter Olympics. And he is regarded with the highest respect from his athletes past and present. Beyond his snowboard career, Lachie is a skydiver, I'd say a thrill seeker pretty confidently. He's a lifelong athlete himself, and he's a really talented storyteller, which I'm curious how much he identifies with that, but as someone following along, you can really tell he's got a knack for it. Currently coming to us from Sweden before heading back to New Zealand, where he no doubt will be capitalizing on the Southern Hemisphere winter, whilst of course visiting his home. Lachie has made a career out of traveling the world, sharing inspiring stories, and bringing out the best in his athletes. It's a real joy to welcome you today, Lachie, to Tall Poppy Talk. First question is, where and how are you today?
Damn, that was a crazy intro. Thank you. I'm currently in Sweden, just finishing off a bit of a training camp here, and I'm feeling pretty good. A bit tired. We've been pretty much training for 2 weeks now, so pretty tired, but I'm good. I'm good. I'm happy and I'm healthy. So we've just started the season, so it's good to get into it.
Okay, so you say just started, and before we started recording for listeners, I was asking the most basic questions. I'm like, okay, you're freestyle, you were this, like the jargon doesn't make a lot of sense to someone who's not in the nuance, right? So simple question, a season for you, when does it start? What does that look like?
Yeah, yeah, good question, I guess. It's kind of like conventional sports now as well. We have like an off season, then a pre-season, and then we don't really call it on season, but like a competitive season. But because we do the Southern Hemisphere and the Winter Hemisphere, we're competing almost all year round. So we typically get 2 months off, which is May and June. And then July is what I would call pre-season now. It used to be a few years ago when snowboarding was less competitive, like pre-season would be September, October time. But now it's a full-blown high-performance sport. So you've got to be training for all year round, just like cycling and rowing and things like that. So yeah, I get like May and June off, like kind of off. And then July, we do some summer training. So on the airbag and in the gym, lots of gym work. And then we go to New Zealand for the Southern Hemisphere in August, September. And the first World Cup, so the first major event is the end of August. So we're straight into it. There's no real warm up into competing. There's like the first event. There's a bit of a break before the events start again in like the Northern Hemisphere winter, but yeah, technically the start of the winter is August for us.
That's crazy that the first World Cup is so early in the season. Like that's exactly why you have to be high performance pre-season, air quotes for an audio podcast, but you have to be on it, because I can imagine that first hit out at the World Cup. It's going to be noticeable if you've been maybe taking it easy. Like it's high performance sport. There's no the margin for relaxation, I guess, is pretty slim.
Yeah, for real. Like it was different a number of years ago, but now it's very competitive sport. And the reason why we have a World Cup this early is because it's in New Zealand. So New Zealand Snow Sports host it, and it's good for New Zealand snowboarding. So they're bringing the world of snow sports to New Zealand. So we kind of have to, if that makes sense. I know in cycling they have probably 3 months of competing, 3 or 4 months of competing. And that's just in the Northern Hemisphere. That's like mountain biking. But yeah, so now it's like an all year round sort of sport. And now with the invention of the airbag, which is what we're doing now, which for people that don't know what an airbag is, it's like a training facility where you like get a jump. You make a jump with snowflakes, like dry slope snow. And you get a big airbag and you can land it. So anyway, that's kind of new in our sport. And now you can snowboard on that through summer. So most athletes just don't stop now.
And the airbag, thank you, because the technical elements, I think people will increasingly know more about. But to your point, maybe like even 5, but 10, 15 years ago, it felt like you didn't have access. If you weren't like literally there on the slopes, you probably weren't able to see, other than the occasional broadcasting, like television or radio. But now with like content creation, the ability with social media, like people can like, I just have more accessibility to it. And that first question I was thinking for you, right, is as with any sport or anything, there's so many like common misconceptions. So easy one, like for rowing, people are like, oh, you must have like big arms. And you're like, no, it's my legs too. It's a full body experience. Like, come on. But with snow sports, I was wondering like, what common misconceptions are you like, oh, no, like that's off, and which ones are like, yeah, that's pretty spot on actually.
Okay. With snowboarding specifically?
Broader, like, are you thinking broader, like snow sports?
Well, snowboarding, I can speak about snowboarding.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, yeah.
Yeah, great question. Our sport's evolving quite a lot over the last 4 or 5 years. So I guess a misconception now is, and I could probably speak on behalf of all action sports in saying this, is action sports athletes, snowboarders included, are highly calculated people. And back in the day when our sport was kind of founded, it would just be like the hooligans, you know, the radical people that would take risks, and you'd call them adrenaline junkies and this and that. I mean, back in the day when snowboarding was founded, they would get kicked out of resorts from skiers, you know what I mean? Like, we weren't allowed to ride on the same slopes as skiers because we were just troublemakers. But as things evolve and, you know, now there's money involved and there's the Olympics involved, things get more and more professional, then the type of person that starts snowboarding or doing action sports starts to change. So I guess some people might just think, you know, they'd watch what we do. So I do slopestyle and big air. If you watch the Winter Olympics, it's the big jumps with the big rails. I don't do half pipe, but we do a little bit of half pipe, but none of my athletes are half pipe riders. So you'd probably watch that and be like, oh my God, these guys are crazy. And they just like throw their bodies off these jumps and hope for the best. But it's really not the case. And the same would go for if you ever watch online, like the world's first, I don't know, triple flip or whatever, like Red Bull do a lot of world's first. Those things are planned out to an absolute T. Like, that's what all action sports athletes do, mountain biking, skydiving, things like that. Is we're not just like adrenaline junkies or irrational thinkers. We're very rational, and we make sure that when we go for it, we know exactly what we're going to do and things like that. So that's probably a misconception. Something that's spot on, right? That's the other part of the question. I don't really know what. Oh, yeah. We don't really like to be told what to do. So in saying that we're irrational, like we're really rational thinkers, we also don't like to be told what to do. And that's partly why I love snowboarding too, is because I don't quite like to be told what to do. That's why I didn't go to university. You know, it's like, I don't want someone to tell me what to learn. So, and that's a big difference between action sports athletes and conventional sports athletes. Is, you know, you can't really tell like a professional snowboarder what to do. You have to, I mean, you do in the end, but you have to like sell it to them a little bit more than just a rower or a runner. And I guess the best example I use for that is if I was a running coach and I told you, Grace, to go for a 10-kilometer run and you didn't want to, but I made you do it, you would, at the end of that 10-kilometer run, you'd probably find some benefit. You know, you'd benefit from that training session. But if I told one of my athletes to jump a jump in bad weather and they didn't want to do it, but I made them do it, the chance of them crashing and having a serious injury goes through the roof. So in our sport, because there's a lot of skill acquisition sport and there's a lot of danger involved, the athlete has to be very committed. And if someone else like externally telling you what to do or encouraging what to do, often that doesn't come from within, and you're half committed and your mind might be somewhere else, or you're not focused, the chance of injury goes up. So the two athletes, conventional sports and action sports athletes, are very different in that regard.
Thank you. That's so interesting. And off that is a couple working backwards. Yeah, it's like the intuition and the commitment to your point. It's like conventional athletes, even if it is like football, netball, like team sports to running, swimming, like the room for risk is not really there as much compared to like what you're doing, which feeds me into the second part. I mentioned interviewing Martin Toomey, and he's involved with New Zealand's Winter Olympic team. And he mentions like the sense of camaraderie that you have in snowboarding or snow sports a bit more generally, because things that are being accomplished is like a feat for the entire sport. Like a lot of things with rowing, for example, it's like get from A to B as fast as possible, and maybe we'll trim down a couple milliseconds, maybe we won't, like off a world record. But in snowboarding, like if someone's trying to, I'm gonna make a term up here, but like a triple lip, right? I know that that's wrong, but then someone's trying to go for like a triple and a half and it's never been done before. He was mentioning, and I'm curious your thoughts, like there's a camaraderie, yes, there's a competitiveness, but it's progressing at such a speed because more and more like attention is being paid to the sport that is snowboarding. You still have this really cool sense of culture around the sport, and people just want to see others like go for it, as opposed to maybe your more conventional sports where it's a bit siloed. There's a greater sense of like unity amongst athletes. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, for sure. Like 1,000,000%. That's what makes action sports, whether it's snowboarding, skating, surfing, wakeboarding, whatever, so amazing. And you can just see that at the Olympics, like skateboarding last in Tokyo, the guy who got third was so stoked for the guy who won. And you know what I mean? Like you don't get that in conventional sports as much. And yeah, you're right. Like the community in snowboarding and in all of action sports is so important to us. Because that's just where it all started. And I always say that snowboarding is a team sport. I've said that forever. Although you compete individually, of course, you compete for your nation, you compete for yourself, and it's only you on the snowboard. But you train with your homies, you train with your friends. And if you're just, there are some riders that like to be alone, but those are the characters that would like to be alone all of the time, But most athletes perform better when they're with a group of people, because you get hyped up, and it is scary. It is definitely scary at times. And if you're with a crew or your friends, and they might not be from the same nation, it's, in my case, majority of my riders are from different nations, but they're all friends. So they train better together. And I think I wouldn't be surprised if in loads of other individual sports like swimming, golf, tennis, they all train with their friends but compete against each other. So I don't think that's too different to conventional sports, but in snowboarding, it's definitely very important. I've never thought about the fact that we're always trying to do world's firsts, and that might bring us all together. But that is kind of the case because our sport's evolving so quickly. It's getting pretty gnarly at the moment, and there's always at every contest someone's doing an extra 180 or something a little bit more difficult, and as a group, because we get behind it, because we understand the sport. We live in this group that not many other people understand what we do. So yeah, it's pretty sick. It is pretty sick.
Yeah, and I love that you call out how calculated it is, because the common misconception is it's oh, let's just go for it. No, not at all. And especially when you do watch your vlogs, which I enjoy a lot, because it shows there's really out there, maybe you'd call them extroverted athletes that you have, but at the end of the day, they're trying to put their body through an insane movement to accomplish something on the slopes. That has to be calculated. And if you feel you're off, to tie into your thing about as a coach, it's got to be a little bit of a juggling act between, you want to push them, but you do have to listen to them when they resist, because if they're not fully committing to it, it's like a lot of listeners might have heard with gymnasts, right? If they get like, it's the nerves or something like that, where this, I forget, Simone Biles, who's the US gymnast, was talking about it, the twisties, where she's like, I can't commit to this, right? I'm not going to do it because it's unsafe. There's probably something very similar in snowboarding, where it's like, if you're not 100% committed, that's where the biggest risk safety wise must come in. Is that right?
Yeah, for sure. Like, yeah, without a doubt. I mean, it's actually funny. Most of the injuries come when you're either too relaxed and you're not focused, and you're just like chilling and you're riding. You do like a basic trick. It's crazy how many injuries come from that. And then of course when you're like pushing the limits at the utmost of your ability. But if you're not tuned in and locked in and focused at when you're at the peak of your ability, and you're like, for example, trying a new trick or doing a trick that you've only done a few times, then yeah, of course the chance of getting hurt goes up. And I've definitely been through my share of hurt, like injured athletes. I've seen with freestyle snowboarding, freestyle skiing, you'd have to double check this, but I'm pretty sure that it has the highest injury rate out of any Olympic sport. And if it's not the absolute highest, it's pretty up there. Like if you have a good season, you might say, oh yeah, I didn't get hurt this season. It was a good season. So the chances of getting injured in our sport is huge. And you have to be locked in. And yeah, we do talk about that all the time. I don't know if you know much about flow state, but that's what we're trying to access. And yeah, it does get pretty scary up there for the athletes, so it is difficult, but yeah, it's important for sure.
Yeah, and I did want to ask about that, and to draw the listener in, it's like, if you've ever been cliff jumping or even at a pool, right, and you're like, oh, that doesn't look that high, and it's maybe 10 meters up, and then when you get up there, you feel so alone and isolated, and you literally, in that instance, are jumping into a safe pool. But I think most people can relate to that sense of like, oh no, and you get like those nerves. Imagine that times 1,000 for the athletes that like Lachie's trying to work with. And a part of that adventure sport, action sport, the subsequent risks, as you just mentioned, are significantly higher. And if you're trying to pursue something that you've not done before, yeah, there's all these things involved. Part of that too, unfortunately, I know like you have had injuries that are like pretty gnarly injuries. As a coach, let alone like as a friend of these athletes, how do you approach getting them back out there? Because rightfully so, they're cautious. And so like, how do you navigate that?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I first started coaching, I was like working with my sister. That's how we got into it. And we went to Japan. This is after I left school and I was like working and whatnot. But we were snowboarding, and on the second day we were snowboarding together, she broke her femur, and she hit a tree, and we weren't even in the park, and she broke her femur. And you don't want to break a femur in the middle of a resort in Japan. They can't give you any medicine until you clear off with your insurance. So I was there, I was 18, broken leg. She thought, it was a really heavy situation. It took us 3 hours to get her to the hospital before she had any pain relief. So like from day dot, like that's what I was used to. And I've, since then, countless dislocated shoulders, broken collarbones, knee injuries. Recently, like a year and a half ago, there was a big crash with one of my athletes where she broke her pelvis, and also, so I've been through it, that's for sure. And usually straight away I'm like, oh, I quit. Then these days I'm like, oh, I quit, I can't do it anymore, because you get so close to your athletes, and usually you're like on a roll and things are going good, and then it sucks. There's no two ways about it. So yeah, and it's a process to bring them back, and coming back from an injury for any athlete in any sport is not easy. It's really difficult, and in action sports, it's especially hard because you have to deal with like doing the scary shit again, and it takes time. it takes time for for boys and for girls. Usually the first season back, they're all always fired up and excited. After an injury, athletes come back pretty good because they've had so much time to think about it and visualize it. But then it comes a time where, like, okay, it's white out, it's really bad weather, and it's windy, and now you have to do this thing, and you're in a situation that resembles what it was like when you hurt yourself, and the trauma can like manifest itself again, and then, they have to go through that, and usually it takes like another year, for them to be back at the very top. So they go through the injury recovery, the rehab process, and then you give them like a good season just to get back riding, and then the season after that you'd probably expect them to be getting results again. But I've had it where they've come right back, and then they've had their second knee injury, and then they're dealing with 2 knee traumas, and it's not just the knee that scares them, but psychologically they're always thinking about their knee, and the doctor says they have no cartilage, so they're going to get arthritis soon, and blah blah blah, and then every time they're snowboarding, they're like, oh, my knee hurts, and that just takes time, and a lot of effort, that's for sure.
Yeah. Thank you. And the time element, even to think like that long term, it's like delayed gratification is a concept I think about a lot, where we want instant results. Like, you want someone to come back, they do one slope, sweet, you're fine. No, it's acknowledging like this season maybe, and then the next season we might be back. And I have noticed a lot with the coaching you do, from just what I've observed, is like the mental element which is involved, which is so sick, because I think, again, in the last like 10 years, there's been a lot more movement in any sport, but probably a lot in action sport, of like the legitimacy of the mental side of things, where looking at an injury, it's like, okay, well, physically you're back, right? So why is there still hesitation? It's because like the fucking mental part of it is huge. So how involved, not I guess how involved, but like for you as a coach, how much time do you kind of give, or like effort is spent, do you think, like the technical part of it, like, okay, well, you need to tighten this and jump here or whatever, versus like that mental coaching and patience with your athletes?
Yeah, great question. It's a very important, the mental side of action sports is huge. Arguably the most, some of the best snowboarders in our industry will say it's like 80%, snowboarding's 80%, mental, and for sure, even more. I actually, after Pyeongchang Olympics, I started my own performance mentoring practice, where I took principles and concepts from action, like the mindset of action sports athletes, and applied them to conventional sports athletes. Because I truly believe that we can learn a lot from conventional sports, but conventional sports can definitely learn a lot from action sports, and teams can learn a lot from what we do. So there are these things like we use visualizing a lot, and all of that sort of stuff that I would apply to like mountain bikers and stuff, and I help some riders there in that space, because there's just so much, like it's mad. Like, my job is probably like, I could split it into thirds, but it always changes from day to day. But part of my job is the technical part of coaching, so looking at the biomechanics of the movement, planning snowboard runs, making sure technically you're snowboarding good, video analysis and things like that. Another part of my job is, because I'm a private snowboard coach, like planning and gym programs, or like registering them for events, planning the schedule and things like that. And then the other part is the mental prep, or like mindset, mental strength and stuff like that. So that part takes up most of my time. So not only am I a snowboard coach, but I'm their mental performance coach as well. So we talk about their mindset every day, like, especially when they're coming back from injuries, because when people come back from injuries, like when you're on the hill, like you can have tantrums, like snowboarding, if you're not feeling it, if you're not feeling it, it's a weird concept, because you don't get it in conventional sports, it's feeling it, then you just don't want to snowboard. It's hard, it's like a block. And if a trick, it's also a skill acquisition sport, so the movements happen in an instant. So if you're not locked in, and you're not feeling it, you're not present, then you're not going to be snowboarding very well. So yeah, a huge part of my job is around mental strength and mental performance, for sure, without a doubt. It's yeah, it's pretty heavy.
That's
Yeah.
like, and even that, right, is a bit of a misconception. I can imagine as a snowboard coach, people are like, oh, cool. So like you're traveling, you're on the slopes, you're doing this. And it's like, again, tying to that first thing you said about how calculated and intentional. I think that's a huge word for you, is like the intentionality in which you do things is probably often kind of covered by like the personality and the fun vibes that you're giving, but it's like, no, you take it very seriously and you have to be super intentional with what you do. And you've got all these athletes. Later, I want to ask a bit more about like the vlogs and the content, because I personally think that's like super engaging. But before that, this pivotal question I always relate to is like tall poppy, right? And before I ask you about like how you would define it, your experience with it, I just want to call out that you're definitely a tall poppy, which is a high performer, right? Like you're doing things that, especially so for listeners, Lachie and I were adjacent in school. Like where we come from, like there's mountains nearby, but you wouldn't say like it's a very common pathway for people to go into like action sport. So increasingly when I'm watching what's going on, I'm like, oh, it's so cool. What's Lachie doing? More and more. So I say that to hype you up because you should be hyped up. But first question for you is, how would you define like tall poppy syndrome? And then how have you experienced it, interacted with it?
Yeah, sweet. Like, if you asked me when we were at school, I would just straight up say I freaking hated it. I hate it. It was a subject I thought a lot more about when I was still in New Zealand, still in school. But I left New Zealand the day after my last school exam. I was 18. I flew to Japan. So I was getting the hell out of there. And if I could have left earlier, I would have, but school and stuff like that. So I don't know why I was like that as a kid. I remember asking my mum when I was like 14, I was like, do I have to go to university? So I wasn't sticking around. And maybe part of that desire to leave New Zealand was because of tall poppy, but can't say it all was. But as I've grown older, I kind of see tall poppy in a slightly different light. Because like if you ask what is tall poppy, I think it's it's a social tool to manage people's egos, right? So there's got to be some element of good. And I believe, as much as I hated it growing up because people would judge you and say things and try and tear me down just for being me. Now when I'm older, I'm like, actually, it did shape me to be a better person in some regards. And there's some times where I wish, I was championed and I could push myself in other areas, but I was too afraid to. And then there's some times where I'm like, oh, I'm glad I didn't become a dick, in the Kiwis' eyes. So, but in saying that, I think it's very important to know that in life, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And in this regards, it's not what you say, it's how, why, and who's saying it. So in the case of tall poppy, it's if you're trying to manage someone else's ego, which we all know is a very important thing to do, is to manage your own ego. But if you're trying to do it on behalf of someone else, you're trying to manage someone else's ego. The only people that can do that are the people that are close to you, like in your tribe. So your family and your closest friends, or a coach, perhaps. Anybody outside of that doesn't know you well enough to know if you're operating in a space of ego or confidence, because confidence and arrogance look very similar on the outside, and the world's best can walk that fine line the best. Like Conor McGregor is a great example. Is he arrogant or is he confident? And I think the only people that should know the answer to that are the people closest to him. And he's been in the public eye for ages. So far, he looks like he's raised, I don't know him, but like he's raised a family and he seems to be going all good. But I'm sure there's people out there that think he's really arrogant. But is it just extroverted confidence? And he's achieved great things. So think what you will, and because confidence and arrogance look really similar in New Zealand, I mean, in school, like if someone's just confident, there are people that would assume that that's arrogance and then try and cut you down. But who's saying it is really important. How they're saying is really important. But why are they saying it? So are they saying it because actually they're jealous, or they're envious, or that person actually beat you at something. So then someone might cut you down for the wrong reasons because they're insecure and they're jealous, so they portray that onto you. And that is when tall poppy is really, really shit. And that's when you need thick skin to be able to tell the difference. And before this conversation, I was thinking about it, because I still sometimes, like, if I put myself out there, I do it less now, but like early 20s, I do it all the time. Like when I was putting myself out there in any way, like coming up with a new idea or social media or whatever, before I did it, I always had the same one person in my head thinking, what would this person, like my best friend from school, like one of my best friends, still one of my best friends today, what would this person say or think about this? Which is so fascinating. But I care, and he's in New Zealand, like I would care for that. But it's interesting that that's my best friend who's close to me. I didn't think about all of the other people that cut me down in school. You know what I mean? I just thought about this one person. So I think there are good parts to like the tall poppy, like managing your own or managing your closest friends' egos and things like that. For sure, is a great thing. But there's obviously the bad side as well. Yeah, for real.
No, seriously, I love that, because I've never thought about, yeah, you hear like, oh, it's not what you do, it's how you do it. Often with training, we would say that, right? It's like, it's not what the training is, it's how you approach it. But the fact there of like the why and the who is gold. So thank you. And the why in particular, because I think too, like a lot of when people are cutting other people down, maybe it's jealousy or maybe it's someone's best interest, and that relates to what you said about the who. Like if my sister's saying something, her intentions for me are truly like genuine, so you've got to be like, okay, I'm going to listen to that. But if it's some random acquaintance or potentially competitor, I think a lot of times in sport too, there's all the fun stuff we're talking about, but your competitors are your competitors, and so sometimes they unintentionally might steer you a little wrong. That's genius, Lachie. When did you, I guess, have you always thought about it like that? Or was it in preparation for this talk that you started to think more about like the who and the why?
No, I don't. I mean, you asked a question, so I thought about. I don't think about tall poppy so much anymore because I haven't lived in New Zealand in a while, and it's definitely more prevalent in New Zealand than it is anywhere. I remember when I left, and I've moved to the UK for a bit, and I was like, God, I wish I like grew up here because I feel like I would have grown in this area of my life. And when I go to the States, it's United States is completely different to New Zealand. Like they champion the ego, and I find it. I don't like it. It's completely opposite to how I grew up. And I'm like, there's cool things about it. You can just do what you want and nobody cares. But there's definitely like, come on, man, like you can't be saying that. That's not healthy for you. That's not healthy for everybody. It's definitely. So I don't know. I haven't thought about tall poppy too much, but yeah, when I think about it, that kind of comes to mind. My opinion of it's changed a little bit, and it's probably because of in New Zealand we're like heavily shaped by the All Blacks. Rugby is a massive part of the New Zealand culture. Like everyone does it growing up, or all the boys at least do it growing up, and all because the All Blacks have been so successful, this most successful sporting team in the world in history. All of the other sporting teams and federations of New Zealand will kind of like try and
like model it.
Yeah, like replicate what the All Blacks are doing. And I know that from some New Zealand snow sports, there's, and like, I don't know, the netball team would implement some of the skills that the All Blacks are doing, and rightly so. But in a rugby team, like if one person has got a massive ego, it's bad for the whole environment because you want that to be one type unit. You don't want beef in a 15-person tribe going to war. You know what I mean? Like you need your brothers back, and you need to be able to trust each other, and that camaraderie is so important. So I think that's where it kind of drips from. Personally, if I do think about it, it's like that's kind of where it comes from, and it's so important there. And then it can when it goes to the masses, that's when people start to get it wrong a little bit.
Yeah, and I have thought about that too with the All Blacks. In particular, like your Richie McCaws or Sam Canes, like people who have been captains do have this like innate humility. Like they turn up, they get the job done, and they'll talk about it afterwards in a nice, distinct post-game interview and that's it. Whereas, yeah, your Conor McGregor's or your like Israel Adesanya's, before the fights even happened, are like, I'm gonna smash you. I'm gonna do like completely different because it's different sports, obviously. But I do think that role modeling of turn up, get the job done, let your actions speak for themselves, that is a part that I really do enjoy of the tall poppy syndrome in New Zealand, where again, because I'm in the States now, I'm glad I had that New Zealand foundation to approach it of like let your actions speak louder than your words. But then I also do enjoy here in the States like the championing of others. Different environments show that it's not so like black and white, and you can kind of adopt things from each environment you've been in, and that's what makes you is you've been able to be shaped by like the different ones you've been in, and then hopefully you can bring that back to New Zealand when you visit and like rub off a little bit. Okay, we don't need to go complete state style, but we can celebrate a little bit more.
Yeah, I think like the good at like I think it's for sure better to quiet the ego and let your actions, like what you said, let your actions speak for you. And that's like fundamental truth. I don't think that you can argue that fact. I think when it comes to the communal aspect of it, that's when we can argue it. But when it's one-on-one, or when you're just talking about how you should approach talking to yourself, we know for centuries, this comes from way back in Stoicism, you know, the days of Aristotle and Socrates, what they taught us, and all the way through Marcus Aurelius and everything like that. They taught us that mental fortitude and letting, like, doing what you need to do without voicing it to others is way more beneficial to us and to our community too, than just going out and having no integrity and saying you're going to do something and not following through with it. You know, we know that's true. And yeah, there are good parts to the tall poppy. There are also bad parts.
Like the great stuff is like you're confident, right? But the shadow side is arrogance. And then same with tall poppy, like the positive of it is like humility, but then the shadow side is like chopping down. Or also I like to focus on the individual's experience of like not going for something. Like you mentioned that one high school mate you think of. That's good because that's a good person probably in your life who's like, well, what would they think about it? But even like when I would do the podcast or when I reach out to guests like you, there's still that part of me is like, fuck, what if Lockie's like, Grace, who do you think you are? Like, I don't want to talk to you. Like I personally have experienced it that way where it's made me hesitate about doing something because I don't want to put myself out there to get chopped down. Have you ever felt that part?
For real. I mean, that's the downside of tall poppy, is it makes people insecure. And of course I've felt that. Like I feel that all the time when you're making crucial decisions. And the more important the decision, the harder it is to like find the confidence to do it. But I think as time goes on and you become a better decision maker, then you kind of learn. I think it all comes back to knowing like who you are, knowing yourself, like, and that starts with just being honest to other people and honest to yourself. And the more honest you are, the more you can understand. The easier it is to learn when you fail, but the easier it is to make decisions. And when you become a better decision maker, you start risking failure, or you do something like, actually that wasn't the right thing to do, and I did like get cut down here and I shouldn't have said it in this way or whatever, but you just take it and you move on. But I've also found that as I've gotten older, that if someone makes me feel insecure, like say you're reaching out to someone and they cut you down, or like whatever it is that voice in your head, and that happens, if someone makes me feel insecure, I know that it's just a reflection of their own insecurity. That's what it is. So because I know that I'm an honest person, I don't lie. So whatever I do, albeit I could get it wrong, is never malicious or wrong to do. So if someone makes me feel bad, now I used to like, get made to feel bad or like get worried about it now, but like I know now if someone makes me feel bad or calls me out or talks to me in a way that isn't very respectful, I'm like, it's kind of water on the duck's back now, because I'm like, well, I know I did my best and I'm an honest person, and you can't hate an honest person. If you're good at learning, you can't. So then I'm like, oh, it's just a reflection of their own flaws. So that's all good. It's up to them. And then I'm like, I'm a little bit more like, oh, I kind of feel bad for them, and I want them to know that about themselves. So they probably don't know themselves enough, and they need to work on some things because they're being mean to like someone that they shouldn't be mean to, And then I'm like, oh, I feel bad for them, and if I can help them, I would. And that goes back to that's a classic stoicism like principle. I can't remember which stoic it was, but a classic stoic. He left his lamp on the windowsill, and he slept and he left the window open, and he woke up and someone stole his favorite lamp, out from outside the window. And at first he was raging. He's like, why would this thief steal my lamp? And then all of a sudden he's like, actually, I left the bloody window open. You know what I mean? Oh, it was my responsibility to close the window and protect the lamp. Then all of a sudden he's like, the guy just saw an opportunity, and the thief just saw an opportunity and took my lamp. But he doesn't know that that's bad karma. That's bad to do that. So all of a sudden he's like, oh, I feel bad for the thief that just stole my favorite lamp. And he just lost his favorite lamp. So you can turn these situations around to, if you know yourself really well, and you're an honest person, and you work to better yourself, then you can turn those situations around relatively quickly, I believe.
Yeah, it's like a common, I don't know if it's that common of a phrase. It's like when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And a big one about accountability, because I'm huge on that, is like, it might not be your fault, but it's your responsibility. And this applies to everything. I think it's like, okay, it might not be your fault that someone's running late and they're supposed to pick you up, but now it's your responsibility to handle that. Like, call the people if you're late for a meeting, right? Like, someone was supposed to pick me up, they didn't. Not your fault, sure, your responsibility and how you react to it now. And it's all about, if you want to bury your head in the sand and blame someone else or an external factor, or be like, okay, it's my responsibility to take accountability for this. And that way the uncontrollables become more controlled, because you're accepting like what I can and can't change about something. So I love that, the way you look at something, and when you start to be like, well, what was my role in it? How can I take accountability? Then you have more control over the next steps. Whereas if you're convinced, I talked myself into it, but I got there. If you keep blaming external factors, then you have no control over what you do next, right? But if you accept that these external factors happen, okay, that happened to me, but now it's with me, what can I do moving forward? That almost becomes irrelevant of how it got to you.
If you like analyze Tall Poppy now, if someone makes you feel bad and you're like, okay, was that, should I have like claimed that thing? You know what I mean? Or if I posted this selfie because did I do it because I've got this new shirt and I want to show off, or I'm looking good and I want to show off? Actually, yeah, that's coming from a place of ego. Okay, I won't do that next time. Or it's like, no, actually, I did it because I'm with my friends and I want to celebrate this friendship. So they can say what they want, so everything for me, you do the same in coaching, you know what I mean? But for me, I've become, over the last few years, I've become very logical and a rational thinker. So everything that people say and everything I do and people do, I'm like, there's very little to no emotion attached to it when I'm thinking it through. I like think about the emotion as part of the equation, but I can like take it away and then figure out what the right and wrong thing to do is, and then go from there. And I think that's what the Stoics would do. But you do the same in coaching. Like, a good coach will always ask what they did right or wrong first before they blame an athlete or look at the athlete. So I'm always like, how could I have approached this contest differently, or how could I have approached this course differently? And because, say my athlete falls in a snowboard contest, the first thing I do is like, oh, they probably shouldn't have spun this direction on this thing, or I should have got them to work on this trick first because this is where they tripped up, or in training we didn't do enough reps on this thing. So like that's where I'm like trying to think about what I can control as a coach, and then then I go to the athlete like, okay, this is what we can do better. What are you taking responsibility for? And they're like, oh, okay, I should have had another half an hour sleep, or like my diet's been bad, blah, blah, blah. And that's how I think you grow and get better. So very applicable to all aspects of life.
Yeah, and the part you said too about like the emotion, when you self-reflect first, it takes the heat out of the situation. Like then when you do go to approach your athlete, or if someone's approaching a person, you've reflected and you've kind of taken the flame and the sting and the venom out of what you're thinking and feeling, and it's back to logic. And then that's
Yeah,
what we can work with.
logic and reason. Yeah, because honestly, like when things are emotional, it's just they just get in the way. You know what I mean? But you got to like it's really important is because there's a fundamental difference between an emotion and a feeling. You know, so if we fall at a contest and we walk away straight away and we're like, sweet, we're all good. I've learned so many things. It's like that's not real. You should feel shitty and hate yourself and maybe throw your snowboard or maybe not throw your snowboard, but you should be like bummed and there's a lot of finance is attached to that contest or people came to watch you and you let yourself down. Like you should feel bummed and you should feel those emotions because those emotions are what going to help us drive change and neuroplasticity in the brain and things like this. So it's really important that you really deeply feel those emotions. But if you let that extend past the present moment, you give yourself a little time frame, then you start moving from an emotion, which is an emotion comes from when we're single cell organisms, when we used to emote, you know what I mean? So danger, scared, run away, you know what I mean? So once you get past the emotion part, it starts going to a feeling, which is just a feeling is like a memory of an emotion. So you start to relive like what had happened. And a lot of people, this is where they get wrong, is they start to get stuck. And then they create a narrative around like that situation. And then if they're upset 2 days later, it's because they're remembering that feeling or that emotion, So and footballers, professional footballers, like Premier League footballers, goalkeepers will train how to let go of emotion. If they make a mistake, like a bad mistake, and let in a goal, they have to get over that straight away because they've got another, I don't know, half an hour to play in the game, and you can still win. And so we call that the refraction time of an emotion to a feeling. And yeah, that's not an easy thing to do, but also very important. Yeah.
And the refraction time, thank you, because I haven't heard of that before. Like when you're in a competition for snowboarding, is there less of that? Like I guess like if we're using football keepers as an example, like yeah, there's half an hour still they need to keep going. Like if you mess up in a competition with snowboarding, is there time in the competition to have like the refraction, or does it have to happen post competition?
You get 2 runs in a slopestyle and big air contest. Well, in a big air, you might be like the best 2 or 3, but let's keep it simple. So you get two runs, best run counts. So you could fall, a lot of time you fall on the first run. So you have to sort, and it sucks because now all the pressure's on the last one. You have to sort yourself out. You might have anywhere between 30 minutes to an hour, depending on the weather and the size of the contest, to sort yourself out for the next run. But during a contest, not really, because there's most courses will have like 6 to 7 features, 3 rail sections, 3 jumps is pretty common. If you fall on one of those, you're like, if you fall badly, your run's over. You're going to get 20, 30 points or whatever. You're not going to be competitive. There are times where you might have a little wobble, like you haven't fallen, but you made a tiny mistake. But when you're in a snowboard competition, you're so locked in, you're in the moment. Like when you're in the moment, you're not really affected emotionally. You're rational. You're going into the thing. Like you don't get scared. Like if something goes wrong, you're not going to, oh, I'm so scared. You know what I mean? Like trying to think of other examples. Skydiving, if you have a malfunction, you're not going to start panicking. I mean, maybe people do, but you're trying to solve the problem. So if you have a little wobble, you just crack on. And I don't think you would think about it too much. It's very rarely do you like have a bad wobble that your whole run changes, and then you have to think, okay, now I'm going to switch into this feature, and I was usually going regular. What I'm going to do? That sometimes happens, but yeah. So if you have a mistake during your run, it's usually over anyway. So
Yeah. And how often do you actually spend like doing the athletic part versus coaching? Because like I've seen some cool photos where you're like taking footage like on the way down, etc. Like how much, because you're an athlete yourself, balancing coaching and actually getting out there, how often?
um, when I was younger, I used to do it a lot. So I started coaching when I was really young. We grew up in the North Island where there's not a lot of snow. North Island, New Zealand, where there's not a lot of snow, and definitely far away from like the hub of snow sports New Zealand. We didn't know what we we're doing when we got into it. So I got into snowboarding at a really old age. I was 18 when I was doing my first tricks in the park and things like that. And so, but when things started going, when we started training and there was the contest and things, I was 19, 20, and I was coaching my sister kind of as like an unpaid coach of the New Zealand team. I wasn't a coach of the New Zealand team, but I was like a registered New Zealand. I was working with my sister who's representing New Zealand, and we would travel with the New Zealand team. So I learned, and I was the coach for my sister. But because I was a coach, I was rooming with Sean Tomo, who's the New Zealand the New Zealand snowboard coach now. And Tomo is widely regarded as one of the top snowboard coaches at the moment, for sure. So I had the privilege at 19, 20 years old to travel the world for 2 years, rooming at the World Cups with one of the best coaches. So I was like 20 years old. So I was like a sponge, I didn't care what people thought. Everyone was like, "You're so young, why are you being a coach? Like, what are you doing?" I was like, "I don't care, I'm gonna ask so many questions." And so he taught me pretty much everything I know now. But because I was so young, I just loved snowboarding. I loved learning. So I was like I'd like learn a principle of snowboarding and do it myself, and then I could teach my sister. So I would snowboard loads in the early days because I was young and I loved it and it was so fun. But now I do a lot less snowboarding, way less snowboarding. We snowboard, 300 days of the year, like I'm on snow all the time. And now I've got, 4 full-time athletes, all world-class. They all need time from me. So I usually, and you film them and whatnot, it just doesn't work where I can like have that much time. But there is definitely, we have like push days where it's like, look, this is serious. We need to get these tricks done. We need to work, blah, blah, blah. And we also have days where it's a lot more relaxed. And we're just focusing on enjoying and riding our snowboards. And, I snowboard every day, but those days I might do some tricks to keep the vibe up. And everyone's like, "Oh, the coach is snowboarding," and they might clip me, they might film me, and we'll just have a bit of a laugh. And I love snowboarding. I got some basic tricks that I pull out the bag every now and again, but way less now than back then. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, because your priorities have shifted, rightfully so. Like your capacity mentally and physically needs to be for the athletes. And on the filming segues in there, I've mentioned many times, like the vlogs, Instagram, the fun stuff as a spectator who's not in the sport can like come along for the ride. Is that something that for you was like just going to be like a nice side thing and has taken more priority in what you do? Because I mentioned in the intro, like the storytelling element of it. I saw like, I did my research. You were commentating, you did some Wanaka radio stuff back in the day. So clearly like broadcasting has been a part of what you've done. So was that just a Lachie thing, or do most coaches also kind of do the content vlog stuff?
Yeah, that's not a common thing for coaches, for real. Yeah, that's so the way back you're talking about broadcast, like I commentated on the work. I don't know, I was 20, 21 years old, I don't know, and someone asked me to, and Natalie wasn't, this is way back, Natalie wasn't in the finals, so Giacomo was like, "Oh, I need someone that knows the tricks to do the world champ commentating." So yeah, I don't know. And yeah, we did have a radio show that was it with Kenny. I don't know. Yeah, I just find myself in those situations, I guess, and then you just do it. It's fun. It's a bit of fun. But with the YouTube recently, I guess that's what you're referring to with the vlogs and things. It's pretty jokes that you're bringing that up actually, because it was never meant to be like a regular YouTube thing. Like in my head when I was like, there was no like plan like, "Oh, I'm gonna start a YouTube channel." That was never like a thing that I wanted to do or like had a lot of like fire to do. What happened was I was like, it was like one summer I was like wondering whether I'm going to keep snowboard coaching or not. Like there was some movement in the team. I think it was after one of the Olympics or in between, I had some things shift around in my life and whatever. I was creating a pilot for like a documentary in action sports, and I was getting into this filming and hosting and things like that. And I had a camera. I got a camera and a microphone. And I was like in between figuring out what I wanted to do. And I was going on a trip with a couple of my athletes. And I was like, oh, I'll film the trip, like just capture some stuff and then make something of it and like learn how to edit. So I did that on a random trip. And it was the sickest thing. It was so cool. It was real. It was like the first one. I like filmed some fun. It was just funny. It was good vibes. And then, you know, that everyone would have a go in front of the camera and would take the piss. And then it turned out to be like really good to watch. Like we all sat down and we watched it, and it took me like no time to make. Like I put 30 or 40 minutes into this thing, and everyone was so stoked on it. I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. So it was totally accidental. But before I go any further, I will say that like filming is a massive part of snowboarding. It's probably a misconception. Like people don't know that filming is like, or how do I say, like, yeah, just filming in general is a huge part of snowboarding. Most people snowboard. Snowboarding is both a creative outlet and a competitive sport, but most people snowboard because it's a creative outlet. So the competitive sport that we see snowboarding in is actually quite small. And like these two worlds actually do, people won't know, but they kind of go back and forth. Oh, you're a contest jock. Oh, you're just a street rider, you know what I mean? But actually the filming, the creative part of snowboarding is huge. A lot of people dedicate their life to snowboarding and film each other snowboarding in the streets or on the mountains, big mountain, and they create like an end of season edit with them and their group of snowboarders and their friends, and that's what they produce. And they might get brands to sponsor it, or they get paid to do it, and that's what snowboarding is to those people. And it's got nothing to do with competing. And that's how snowboarding started. You know, snowboarding was never like, oh, we're gonna compete against each other. And the same with surfing and skating. It was never like, oh, we're going to see who's the best. It was like, let's go and do this because we love it. It's so fun. Oh, we can capture each other and we can sell that product at the end of the season and make money to do this full time. Hell yeah, let's do that. That's how it all started, you know. So filming and editing and creating is a huge part of our sport. Creativity is a huge part of our sport. Like we get rewarded in contests for creativity, which is another thing we can talk about, which probably people don't know about. But so yeah, anyway, filming was great. It was like, it just fit in. I was like, yeah, I'm going to film us. You can have some clips. We'll take the piss and whatever. I'll put it on. I'll start a YouTube channel. I'll put it up, see what happens. And people loved it. And I was like, okay, maybe. And then I was like, oh, this is good. Like I've got another athlete joining at this time, and I think she's going to get along with everyone. What I'll do is I'll run another like trip, and we'll see how everybody is. And I'll film this too. And I filmed it, and just like that, the camera created this real sick culture in the team. And I saw it straight away. Like I brought another athlete in, and she's great. She gets along with everyone, but like the friendship started straight away. And I feel like the camera kind of helped that. Like we're throwing around the camera, we're doing funny things, we're saying things, we capture it. I was like, oh, this is cool. And then I would make an edit in the evening. I'd put like an hour into it. Like it would take me no time. And then we get to watch it back, and everyone sat around the thing. We put it up there, and everyone's like, oh, we're all friends and we're snowboarding. This is so sick. So instantly I'm like, actually, this is great for building culture within the team. And being able to like watch your adventure and watch your performance and watch how you're growing and watch how you're bonding back. I think there's a lot of value in that, which I wasn't expecting. So I was like, oh, I'm going to do another one. You know what I mean? Everyone loves it. And it was low hanging fruit for me. So that's how it kind of started. It was just like, I saw it as like a culture building thing, and it was fun. And I also, you know, I actually really thoroughly enjoy the creative like outlet that editing is. So the editing process for me is like enjoyable. So I get to like put my headphones in. I used to write a lot, and that was my creative outlet. But I find when I'm really tired, it's hard for me to like think and write about sports science or whatever it is, because I'm just tired. And when I'm on the road, I might get a day off and I'm too tired to like think. But I can edit. I can put my headphones in, I can just sit there, and it's kind of mind numbing, and then I add some songs and stuff. So I enjoyed the editing process. So it was like low hanging fruit, no skin off my back. and it created this cool culture. And all of a sudden it was like, oh, now I have to do the vlogs, like I'm gonna stop doing them now because they're getting like pretty intense. And they're like, nope, you're not allowed to stop. You have to keep doing them. So now I'm kind of stuck with the vlogs.
Oh, well, they're awesome as someone who obviously watches them. But too, what I find like is fun is you can go back because writing is great, but like you're gonna read it maybe, but it'll be in a journal, whatever. But like with the videos, or for me with the podcast, it's like a library. And I go
Yeah.
back and I'm like, oh shit, I had like an hour conversation with ABSC. And for you, it's like and even in one of the more recent vlogs, you guys were watching the year prior vlog, and it's like, oh sick, we were doing that a year ago. Like, and then you get all those feelings of nostalgia and pride because look, you didn't even know what you were going to accomplish now, or like all those cool feelings that visual storytelling gives. Quick fire questions. Best place, snowboard specific, you've been?
LAAX, Switzerland.
Why?
Quick fire, or do you want me to type?
Yeah, sorry. Me being like quick fire. Why? Okay.
But yeah, but it was like the first place that me and my sister, well, not the first place, when she started doing the World Cups, we had a base in LAAX in Switzerland. So it was like where we kind of started, things started to go up. But it's also like a freestyle snowboarder's paradise. So it's like rated one of the best. It is one of the best parks in the world, hands down. It's like there's a community there of snowboarders. So it's like it's an amazing for the culture. Like the culture there is amazing, but it's just beautiful as well. You're in the middle of the Swiss Alps, and you go up there, and there's a lot of good weather days. Huge resort, pipes, amazing slopestyle course. You got a whole lift run, which is probably bigger than any run in New Zealand, all dedicated to park. So like rails, jumps, everything. So it's like an adult's playground. So that's beautiful, and it's just a nice place, and Switzerland's awesome. And I don't know, it holds a real special place in my heart, probably because I got into it there. It's where I learned some of my first big tricks. I learned, my first double corks there, and I've had some really cool moments. Yeah, it's a great place. Yeah.
Okay, your favorite trick to do, like for you?
For me,
Yeah.
favorite trick now or back in the day?
Let's do both.
My favorite trick now would be sit on my snowboard and drink an espresso. No, that can't. I'm pretty prone to like a front blunt, same way, like front blunt 270 on a rail. That's one of the ones that probably comes out the bag every now and again. Or if I was doing a jump, like a front three would be good. But I don't know. I used to do bigger tricks, but it's been a few years. I think if I'd really tried, I'd be able to keep up, but like do some of those tricks. But yeah, just a front three, a back seven, front blunt two. Those are the tricks that I usually pull out.
I like the espresso one. Okay. Oh, this is actually tough. Best memory as a coach.
Best memory as a coach.
Or like memory, keeping in mind that no doubt later Lachie will be like, oh, how could I have forgotten this time? So best memory.
One of the best memory. Okay, a recent one. It's hard to say, but I've got a new. This is really hard to say, but best memory, like best moment as a coach.
Sure.
I don't know. There's loads. There's probably some really nice ones of me and my sister traveling the world when we first got into it. She got 10th at a World Cup big year in China, in Beijing, and there's like scaffolding jump like in the middle of China. And I think that was like one of her best results, 10th at a World Cup, which is real cool for her, and amazing for both of us at the time, just me and my sister hanging out. A recent one was like, I've got a new athlete, he's younger, and he landed his first like really big trick, cab 18, and he'd never done it before. It's a really big trick. It's like a world-class trick, and it was like, that was a cool memory because it was like, him and I was like, dude, you got this, and he did it, and everyone was like, oh my god, he did it. So that's always a really nice one. And I've got loads of great memories because we spend so much time together. They're all like really close. We're all really close, so it's like a little family. So it's hard to single one thing out. I'm sorry.
No, I figured it would be. So those were great. Thank you. And then, okay, advice for an aspiring snowboarder specifically, like someone up and coming, or just like curious, keen to get into snowboarding.
If they want to do it professionally,
Yeah.
yeah, work on the basics. So snowboarding is if there's the fundamentals of snowboarding, freestyle snowboarding, and often when you're starting out, you want to skip these steps because it's just way cooler to do the big tricks. But you really got to work on the fundamentals, how you're standing on a snowboard, how you're using your body to manipulate your equipment to get more performance out of your snowboard, and just being able to ride your board and the mountain correctly or efficiently. There's no correct way actually in snowboarding, but more effectively and efficiently. And making sure you're spinning all directions and just all the basics, all directions, all the basics up into a 7 before you start going ham. Because a lot of the athletes I coach are a lot older, and they maybe come to me. Like, I've never really coached like athletes from Groms, like young athletes, and brought them through. I coach adults on the world tour, and if they come into my group, they've already like gone through that phase of learning how to snowboard. And a lot of them come to me with really bad habits. So I spend a lot of time like relearning people how to like changing their habits on snowboard. And that process would be so sick if they had no bad habits. You progress way far. It's like a hockey stick. You progress way further if you have good fundamentals. I actually have made like a course on this. So on the fundamentals of snowboarding, like I'd like to give back in that way. And if you're getting into snowboarding, take your time. Just take your time. Because once you start landing stuff, it's like exponential.
Wow, because that makes sense too, right? Like these adult athletes that you have, these habits they've literally done thousands of times. Like it's muscle memory. So to untrain that impacts everything. It's like trying to undo a knot that's connected to all these other tricks they know how to do, right? Like you can't change the fundamentals without impacting how they do everything else too.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
learn the basics is a good advice.
Yeah. Learn the basics and just take your time. Take your time. Yeah. And if you're a strong rider, like with the basics, you're less prone to injury. And then if it takes you a year slower than someone with bad habits, the chance of them hurting themselves and taking a year out from injury later in their career goes up, So holistically, you can see that you're going to get more time snowboarding. Did we cover the conversation, the points you sent through to me? Asked me what high performance.
How do you how do you define high performance?
Now I have to answer that question. Yeah, high performance is, to me, high performance is probably, in one word, I call it integrity. Setting goals and making sure that you follow through with those goals. That, I think, sums up high performance, because whoever can do that the best is going to be the world's best, taking away genetics. I think if you can think of something and you can dream of something, and if somebody else can do it, why can't you? And that to me is non-emotional. It's completely logic. It's like, okay, my athletes are like, here, Olympic gold. Okay, so I go, okay, Olympic gold in Italy. What are the tricks? It's my job to think, what are the tricks that they need to learn? 1, 2, 3 tricks, whatever. Okay, so when do they need this by? They need it by this date. When do they have to learn it? They have to learn it by this date. What do they need to do today? What do they need to do tomorrow in order to? And then my job, and then they're like, the athlete will be like, yeah, I subscribe to that plan. That's what I want to do. That's their plan to own and take responsibility for. And I'm like, sweet. Now my job as a coach or a mentor is just to be a mirror to them, to tell them when they don't have integrity, or when they're not being the world champion version, when they're not being the person they say they want to be. So my job becomes quite easy. It's like, okay, I know that you need to land a front 10 by the end of this season or whatever. Like, it means you need to be prepping for it by here. It means by this time you need to be training it or whatever. We need to be in the gym, or I know that you need to lift this much weight, or you need to be this fit, X, Y, Z at this time. And if you're not doing it, I'm just going to tell you. So it makes my life pretty easy. I'm like, well, just call you out, and then they're like, oh, I'm like, well, you're lying in bed and you're sleeping in when you say you're meant to be this person, So, and you can apply that to any area in life, high performance, I guess. So if I really think about it, high performance is having integrity.
because you're very honest, the integrity call outs are probably like, it's no big deal for you to do that. It's just like a instinct.
Yeah, yeah, and you gotta be. I think, yeah, I do it all the time. You know what I mean? And some people shy away from it, and rightly so. It's like it sucks to call people out, or if you don't have to. I'd never do it to my friends. You know what I mean? But if I'm in a coaching situation, what I get paid to do, you know what I mean, is to like. And I mean, there's right and wrong ways to do it, and it's not what you say, it's how you say it. You know, and you got to take in their situation into consideration, and a good coach will always talk differently to different athletes, you know what I mean, or approach situations with athletes differently. But the amount of like one-on-one conversations I have about with the athletes is ridiculous. It's all the time, you know what I mean? It's like I have to take, because we're in a team as well, so I have to think a lot about the team culture, and it's my responsibility to make sure that everybody gets along at the end of the day. That's why some athletes will join our crew and want to join our crew, but if they don't fit in with the group or whatever, that, you know, they're not getting along. It's the classic "better people make better All Blacks" quote. You know what I mean? Like, if you're not, I don't mind if you're one of the world's best. If you're going to make my life and my athlete's life difficult, we can't have you. You know, so because it's my job at the end of the day to have these one-on-one difficult conversations, and I have them all the time. It's like, look, you're not showing up, or they'll come to me and be like, oh, you know, I'm lacking in my belief about this thing, and I'm like, well, you said you were going to go to the gym this much, or you said you were going to work on your sleep, or you said you were going to work on your time management, and look, you're late all the time. What do you think's going to happen? You know what I mean? And through that process, I feel like we've developed, you know, the team, the athletes I have in the team have grown as humans hugely, which is pretty sick. Yeah.
Yeah, and what you said too, it's not what you say, how you say it, but also why you say it. So you're their coach and you're not saying it to be a dick. No, you're saying it because you agreed at the start of this thing that, all right, you wanted to achieve check 1, 2, and 3. We discussed the plan. I just want to help you get to that plan. So yeah, bringing in that thing you said, which I really do love, of like the how, the why, and the who says it. Like, powerful conversation, so interesting. The sign-off question I have is a complete vibe change, but just to give us more context as to who Lachie is, if you had to listen to just one musical artist for the rest of your life, who's it going to be?
Wow. You have to give me some time to think. One artist, either Pink Floyd or the Rolling Stones, I guess.
Vibes. I think those are good. And I'm thinking too, that probably translates to most environments you're in. Like, there's something from their repertoire that you can work with.
Yeah, I mean, but my athletes are a bit like younger than me, majority of them, so they don't really like my music, you know. I listen to a lot of stuff, but music, we didn't talk about this, but music is a huge part of our sport, you know. Like, what other sport, like, do you get to before dropping in and doing your sport? Do you put headphones in and listen to AC/DC and go, yeah, let's, you know what I mean, and drop in, you know what I mean? You know, rowers aren't doing that. Cyclists aren't doing that. You know what I mean? The cyclists might train with the music or whatever, but yeah, music and helps with like creativity and vibe setting and things like that. So yeah, although I'm never DJ in the group, not that often.
Thank you for your time and to join Tall Poppy. Like, for me personally, and then podcastly, it's been a great, like, really great conversation. So thank you so much for your time.
No, thanks for having me. I'm stoked.
Thank you so much for listening to Tall Poppy Talk. We'll see you next time. Feel free to check us out on socials, YouTube, and the website. Thanks for today's guest, and we'll see you all next time. Take care. Be kind.